media. It's an absolute honor for me to be here today. My presentation seems to be keen to get along way ahead of me, but I hope that I will be able to take it in its stride. I see it's just been changing and flipping there. So this evening I'm going to speak about how knowledge management can influence the growth of women leaders in Malawi. And I know that issues of women in leadership are issues that arouse a lot of emotive debate. People get very emotional when we speak about women in leadership, particularly when we talk about women in leadership in religious bodies, where, for example, they don't even allow any women to take formal offices, as well as in politics. Fortunately, this evening, I'm not going to dwell a lot on specific sectors of the economy or the society, but I'll just speak in general about women in leadership. I believe that knowledge management can actually expedite and fast track the joining of more women leaders in Malawi. And it's important for us to acknowledge the fact that there are a lot of stereotypes and biases within the society that result in many people linking leadership with masculinity. It's really unfortunate indeed that most of the times the characteristics which are used to describe powerful leaders are those that are actually associated with men. And the fact that most of the times when, for example, someone describes a man as assertive, it's seen as the man is very ambitious and he's a go-getter, he's admirable. Whereas when a woman is described as assertive, most people tend to believe that she's bossy, she's fussy, she's pushy, and they don't really get to appreciate them in the same way, even though the two behaviors are actually the same. In fact, the biases are so strong that when people at a call center are responding to emails, if they put a male name underneath as the responding person to that particular subject matter, the response from the people is usually very positive. Thank you very much for your assistance. But if a female name just comes there, regards Jane, suddenly the response that you get there is, you don't understand my query, even if the two responses are actually exactly similar. And this is actually a very proven research. So I think we shouldn't underestimate the fact that there are indeed serious biases when it comes to leadership. When we also look at, in general, how Malawi is doing around this particular set of objectives around giving more women in leadership, bringing more women into leadership, we find that Malawi is actually at the bottom of the UN Genders Inequality Index, the GII index. We rank number 173 out of 188. And even though the Constitution of Malawi in 1985 guarantees equal rights for men and women, in reality, the fact is that we are still a very long way to go. I've got another example from Saudi Arabia, where a research was actually done, and it's found that even when you try and put women into leadership, they themselves judge themselves and others and the place where they work with a lens of gender to it. And you know that in Saudi Arabia, they actually look down quite significantly upon women. So even the women are failing to change that mindset on their own in terms of how they view themselves. So my proposition to bring in knowledge management into this is actually quite pertinent. Recently, I had the opportunity to present to over 200 women who were on a leadership program from across the continent. And after sharing what I thought was just my simple, humble journey towards leadership, afterwards, the amount of debate that I spurred, which resulted in women coming to say, you've just affirmed to me that my decisions that I've made in my life and in my leadership journey were correct, showed me that there's hunger out there for us to share knowledge and for us to be able to interact in a way that enables women to become more confident and stand up for what they believe. In a recent, I just want to now come forth to defining what really I mean by knowledge management. What I mean by knowledge management is that if you look at knowledge, knowledge is just information that changes something or somebody and makes it actually better. But when you start taking that knowledge and you begin to harness it towards a specific strategic end, then that actually becomes knowledge management. I just needed to clear that just in case you think knowledge management is something that's very complex. It's actually just the harnessing of knowledge in order for us to reach a strategic goal. I would now like to talk about how knowledge is actually created. How do we create knowledge, and what is really important about creating knowledge? So if you look at what's happening nowadays, every day there's new knowledge being created. You find that as you go through your Facebook, statuses are being updated. That's information coming up. Blogs are being posted onto the internet. Twitter, should I talk about Donald Trump? Opinions always being put forward through Twitter and other various social medias. So you find that each and every day there's new information that's going out there. And this information is becoming knowledge as people begin to adopt and embrace this particular information to shape their opinions. I will give a very controversial example in this one so that you can really get what I mean. I think sometime in, was it October time, there was an issue in the social media. It also came in the mainstream media about a group of women who had beaten up a fellow woman. And if you looked at the feeds that came through from the social media, there were lots of comments. And I'm sure those comments were able to shape each one of us in terms of how we viewed this particular matter. So when I speak about who is writing our narrative, that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about who is leading the opinion, who's putting information about women in leadership out there, and how are we allowing them to do that, and how are we enabling them to do that. That particular issue is even of more importance when given the fact that it had to go to court, and the judge had to make a decision. And based on that decision, it will be held as a precedent to other cases that will come in the future. You know that when judgments are being put, the judge always says in the case of Kubwalo versus Chaika, this happened, and they will quote that particular precedent. In this case, whatever the outcome was, becomes a precedent of what happens. And therefore, unknowingly, knowledge was created by this group of women who just thought they were busy trying to take the law into their own hands and create issues. So when I speak of knowledge management, that's exactly what I'm talking about. And as women, we need to start asking ourselves, who is writing the narrative for women? Who is it who is determining the long-term views about women that will be put out there in the future? It's important that these particular matters be chosen and written by the appropriate people and the people who know it best. Any researcher would tell you that there's something called researcher's bias. So if you were to give two researchers exactly the same data, you would be able to get two completely divergent views after they finished analyzing the data. And that's because whenever they are looking at a specific issue, they look at it in accordance to how they see things, and they'll interpret it according to their own cultural, social, and other references that they have within the context of their own existence. And therefore, it's important that much as we would like to encourage men to participate in drawing the narrative for women, it's important that women begin to take a more active role in developing the narrative for women. The reason I say this is because I believe that most of the researchers who have written any work about leadership in particular have been men. And perhaps that's why up till now we still face circumstances where the leadership dialogue is actually viewed with a masculine skill to it. When you look at the real context of leadership and the content of what we know about leadership, what we actually find is that women and men are not looking for different things. Women and men may be different, but otherwise what they are looking for in leadership is actually quite similar. What they're looking for in organizations that they would like to work for is actually quite similar. I'll give you the example of the Fortune magazine that did a recent survey actually this year looking at the best companies to work for women. And I was keen to find out what type of organizations would women really love to work for. So I went out to look at the reasons why those particular companies made it into the top 100. I'll read to you some of the reasons that were given. They said, it offers strong support for growth and has an egalitarian culture where the best ideas win. It's great for anyone who wants to establish, continue, or further develop a career. The next one says, the company cares about putting people first. The next one, employees tout the diversity of opinions, ages, and backgrounds. The next one said, staff say that they feel they are part of a bigger family. And the other one said, it's not an old boys club. Given all the comments that I've just read to you straight out of the Fortune magazine, can I have, by show of hands, any men who would not want to work in such an organization? All of us want to work for this organization because actually the attributes that made this organization a good place to work for women are actually the same attributes that would make it a good place to work for men. And therefore, this just goes to support the point that I'm saying that men and women, when it comes to leadership, they are actually generally similar. However, having said that, we are physiologically different. The fact that we are physiologically different doesn't give us less brain power than men. In fact, I would argue it makes us much stronger because we've got this magic of creating new life and nursing early life within us. And we can actually do that at the same time as be outstanding performers in the various organizations that we work and being able to be leaders. And therefore, it's important for us to acknowledge the fact that our uniqueness doesn't in any way make us in any way inferior to men. This lecture will not talk about who cleans the house, will not talk about who washes the dishes, will not talk about who cooks. And this is not because I'm looking down on housewives. Actually, I am applauding housewives because to be a housewife, you need a lot of management skills and it is a full-time job. You need to have communication skills, negotiation skills, And the kids are getting cleverer and cleverer. So by the time they are 4, you actually will be negotiating about what time the candy is going to be eaten. So the kids are actually getting more and more interesting. And so I'm not going to look down upon housewives, because they too have got a very complex set of skills that they need to bring to the job. And these skills are also the same necessary skills that are required for a job. But what I'm saying is that women should be conscious and well informed about the fact that they actually have a choice. A choice to be managers in their homes and therefore lead their families from home, or to be managers and leaders within a society and therefore go out to take part and participate in the wider community. Before I go any further in terms of trying to clarify what then women can do, I would like to touch on an issue around how we are transferring knowledge among women. What are the things that are happening from all the aspects of life, socially, culturally, within an organization, politically? How are we shaping the next generation in terms of how we transfer information? So we all know and probably grew up in the era where we were forced to wear pink because girls wore pink, where everybody who bought toys for us actually bought us a doll as a girl, and boys were forced to wear blue or green, and they actually had cars bought for them. But who told them that that child actually wants to play with such a toy? It was all lying within gender biases. And therefore, what I'm trying to encourage us to do is to move away from those biases, from those elaborate cultures that go through several months of initiating a woman and preparing her for marriage and do nothing about helping the man and preparing him for marriage too, which just basically says that the woman has to put a lot more effort in making any relationship work as opposed to what the man should do. This is typically labeling, and I think in this day and age, we actually need to discourage it. What I'm saying is not encouraging us to throw away our values and forget what we actually stand for as Malawians and as a Malawian culture. But what I'm saying is we need to look and relate to our children as individuals and get to understand their interests. And stop judging that girl who likes to climb trees and let her climb as many trees as she wants, because perhaps she's preparing to be the next astronaut. And stop discouraging the guy who likes fashion and who would like to choose the type of shoes he wears, the colors he wears from a very young age. Because maybe that male, that young boy that you are looking after, that young son of yours, is going to be the next best fashion designer there is in the world. So it's very important for us to make sure that as we transfer knowledge and as we transfer skills, we are taking into account what the child prefers and actually making sure that we embrace that. What I'm also trying to say is that we need to move away from institutionalizing the marginalization of women. I'll be controversial here and say, why do most political parties have a women's league and a youth league and do not have a men's league? It's a question that I always battle with. And when we have it, are we trying to say that women are so much in the periphery of the activities of that organization that they deserve to group up on their own in order for them to gain power? Or are we then saying that perhaps it was necessary back then and now it might not necessarily be necessary because women are now empowered and we are coming of age and we need to be streamlined so that the empowerment can actually start to show? We need to start blurring that gender divide, and the time has never been riper than now. I've noticed that at many women in leadership conferences, and even this evening as I was looking at the people who are attending and trying to figure out who's going to come, whenever we talk of women in leadership, the men don't actually come to participate in such activities. Thank you for all those men who came. I have a lot of respect for you, and you are actually leading the way in terms of starting to blur that particular gender divide that we talk about. Because it's about time that we started talking about issues that impact on all of us while we are all together, so that you can understand and the man can understand how to support his sisters, how to support his wife, how to support his mother as they go through their career growth, rather than for us to segregate the issues and say women issues for women and male issues for men. I think I'll be doing myself a disservice if I were to leave this particular podium without churning out what looks like a clever theory, but it's actually something that's very simple and comes from this few simple points that I've actually shared with you today. And this is a theory that I've decided to call the ladder of women in leadership. And basically, I believe in this ladder. This ladder has got 5 steps. Please don't confuse this ladder with the corporate ladder and growth within our careers, because many women have actually described the corporate ladder as a jungle gym rather than a ladder. You never really just go up from one step to the other. Sometimes you have to step sideways, sometimes downwards in your way to reaching the top. So it's important not to confuse the two. What I'm saying is that there are 5 steps towards becoming and building a critical mass of women leaders. The first step is choice, making that choice. The second step is building competence. The next one is sitting at the table. The next one is bringing others up. And the last one is actually around rewriting the female narrative. I'll go through each one of them in a bit more detail. What do I mean when I say the choice? I come back to the issue that I spoke about earlier around the physiological makeup of men versus women, and the fact that we are unique in that we bring forth life. We nurse the early years of childhood. And I'll say that as a woman, it's important for you to take a step back and really think about the choices that are available to you in terms of what you do with your career. Why this is particularly important is because if you don't take that first step to really think about it, you will end up feeling really, really conflicted for the rest of your life. And so it's important for you to think, am I going to be a full-time mother? I have got very senior executives, colleagues of mine within the Standard Bank group who are extremely senior, and we thought they are going right to the top. And they've actually stopped midway and said, all my life I've been pursuing my career, now I want to start having children, I'm going to stop working, will depend on my husband. And it's a very good decision because it's a choice that has been made after somebody has thought about it thoroughly. But I also know of very clever women who've decided, I'm going to leave the corporate space and I'm going to take a job, maybe as a school teacher, so that I can be knocking off from work half day, and for the rest of the time, I can actually be home with my children. That's 50-50. That's kind of like a compromise. And then I've met women like me who carry 3-week-old babies on flights with nannies all the way across borders to follow that conference and that next leadership summit. Again, it's a choice that we've made, and I respect myself for it, and I stand by it, because at the point when I took that particular decision, I had thought about all the various options that are there, and I was very, very comfortable with the choices that I made. Having said that, more and more organizations are realizing that there are a lot of women who are conflicted or who make the choice to actually come to work despite wanting to raise families. And the organizations have actually organized virtual work, flexi hours, nurseries in the various offices and daycares, and all this actually works. But all this is going to speak about the choices that we make. I'll give you an example that's very interesting. So we don't have to look for examples too far away. I've just given you my own example. I did take my last born child while he was 3 weeks old to a conference. Yes, I confess, but that was the choice that I made. There's a very powerful woman leader. She's actually among the top 100 CEOs globally, Indira Nooy. I'm sure some of you may have heard about her. She's the CEO and chairman of PepsiCo in the United States of America. She's a very, very busy woman, and she has a very demanding schedule. Her children call the switchboard of PepsiCo and say, "Mom, Mom." And now the whole organization knows if any child calls and says, "Mom," it is because she's looking for the CEO, and they put her through to Indira. She has children who go to school, and they organize teas, class teas at 9 o'clock in the morning every Wednesday. And imagine a busy woman with a busy schedule of her caliber trying to make it for a Wednesday morning tea every week. It's just not practical. So whenever she can't make it, which is very often, she gets her PA to call the school in advance. And when they call the school in advance, they find out which mothers in the classroom of her daughter didn't make it for that particular tea that morning. So that when she gets home in the evening and her daughter says to her, "Mom, you didn't come again today," she will then go on to say, "But so-and-so's mom wasn't there, and so-and-so's mom wasn't there. So what's so special about the fact that I wasn't there?" So I think when we've made these choices, we actually need to make sure that we back it up with some strategies that will help us to support our families through these things. The second point in my ladder is building competence. It's important, ladies, that when we've made the choice to be career women and to be women in leadership and to rise, whether it's within a church, whether it's within an organization, politics, or whatever it may be, it's important that we be competent. I am not a subscriber at all of this empowerment and equal opportunities initiatives that say by 2020 there should be 50-50 women in organizations, because what that does is it forces incompetence into an organization. And before we know it, people will be like, "You see all these women, they're incompetent, they are incapable of doing what we are actually looking for as an organization." And therefore, it's important for us to make sure that we become masters of the careers that we've chosen to take part in. They say to achieve mastery, you need to have achieved 10,000 hours or 6 to 10 years. It's not small. It means that as women, we really need to work hard to become masters at the fields that we want to do. So you know that being a woman in leadership is not for sissies. It's actually something that requires us to put in a lot of work. The next point that I'm going to put here is around sitting at the table. And what do I mean by this? There are moments in time, some of you might have experienced it, in any meeting, in any context, where you are the only woman in the group. You might even be the chairman of that particular meeting, but you're the only woman in that group. And when the tea or snacks come, all the men look at you and expect you to serve the tea. Ladies, don't get up. It's not your duty. It's important for us to make sure that when we get to the boardroom, when we get to those tables or whatever meeting rooms that we get to, we sit there as an equal partner to everybody who is there. It's very, very important. And I think we need to know that so that we can go out there feeling really empowered to stand up for what we believe in. We should show up and show our competence. We should get to a point where when you are missing from that room, the meeting can't start because they need your competence on the table. So it's very important for us to be missed when we are unable to sit on that table for any reason or for one reason or the other. And it's also important for us to network both within the boardroom and outside of the boardroom with all those genders across the divide, because it helps us to be able to sit at the table more effectively in future. Having achieved all that, remember our objective is to build a critical mass of women in leadership in Malawi. And so we are competent, we are sitting around those decision-making tables. There's nothing better than us reaching down and pulling others up to come and join us. And I know that this is not always easy for us women, because for every woman who really genuinely wants to mentor fellow women, there are 2 or 3 who just want to close the door and remain the only ones. Because it is prestigious to say, I was the first woman to do this and I'm the only one. It does sound prestigious, but it's absolutely ridiculous. Yeah. Let's bring other women up. And so we might assume that every woman who's made it can mentor other women, but it's not necessarily true. If a woman is really committed to mentoring other women into women in leadership, it's important for them to acquire the necessary skills to be able to do so. And you don't have to worry. I'm not talking about going to school. I'm talking about Google. All the information is out there, so you don't really need to worry. And I think it's been acknowledged in Malawi that we still have a gender imbalance. In our parliament, I think there's just 21% female representation. And so the story may replicate itself in some organizations, some better than others, but still there's a skew towards men in many organizations. And therefore it's our obligation, women listening to this lecture, to go out there and bring other women up so that they can go up and rise and become and join us in terms of where we are. We need to change this particular phenomena where we have few women, and we need to stop boasting about I'm the only woman in our management team and be able to say, let's have more women in the management team and be able to try and build that forward. My last one, which is my favorite actually, is when women start to write and determine the destiny of other women. When women start to create the knowledge, when women start to create and rewrite that narrative. Why is it important to rewrite the narrative? It's important because information is changing every day. Gone are the days when auntie was the best source of knowledge for the girl child. Those days are gone, and I don't think they would come back again very soon. And so it's very important for us to make sure that as women, we are disseminating the right information to girls. And how do girls get their information right now? What is the media that they use? They are using a lot of social media. They are deferring a lot to social media. So whatever you say, they'll go back to see what does Instagram say? What does Twitter say about this particular issue? What does, oh my God, there are so many of them, Tumblr, there are so many of them. What does it say? And or even good old-fashioned Google. And so after the woman has gone through the steps of making a choice around how to become a leader, or making a choice to become a participant in leadership, having acquired the necessary competence, sitting at the table, mentoring others, they have actually earned the badge to become, well, that's in my view, they've earned the badge to become writers and scholars on women in leadership, because what they say is matched by experience. It's matched by what they've seen practically. And therefore, women, whatever we experience along our journeys, write it and put it out there so that other women can actually get to learn and know about you. As I said in the experience that I had with sharing with these 200 women in leadership program, I really realized that my journey was not unique. It was not different, because everyone came to me and said, me too. What were they lacking? They were lacking that affirmation that what has happened, what you're going through, or what you've seen is actually okay. And therefore, we need to make sure that we keep the conversations alive across all the genders, not just across women. Let women write their own story. Let these stories be corroborated by the male writers so that they can be complete and so that we don't look like we are trying to work within a vacuum. Let's all partner in terms of trying to move these particular thoughts that I've put forward in this lecture together. And I don't think that I would feel good about myself if I've taken time, your precious time, to impart this particular lecture. And therefore, I hope that at least you can take one thing out. And if there's one thing that you can take out, it's around making sure that we rewrite the female narrative. We rewrite the story about women in leadership so that we can begin to attract more and more leaders to come and join and participate and not even feel guilty about choosing a career over choosing to focus on the home full-time. At this point in time, I think I have shared with you my thoughts and made with you my concluding remark, which is, if you missed anything else, think who is writing the narrative for women in leadership. It is time that we start doing it so that we can build a critical mass of women leaders to lead us. Thank you for your attention, and I invite questions. This particular lecture that I've given is actually, I'll upload it later on this evening on my Twitter and my LinkedIn. And I can also WhatsApp it to you if you contact me on the number given there. Thank you. How do I balance out myself as a leader in the boardroom if I'm sitting around male leaders, or at least if we are not as many female leaders? When I look at myself as a leader, the question came from somewhere there, Matthew. When I look at myself as a leader, I look at myself as a leader first before I look at myself as a woman. Do I face the whole issue around people thinking I'm bossy? Yes, I do. It's there. Do I relent and step back and stop doing what needs to be done or what is the right thing? No. Do I still learn how to balance between being aggressive and being assertive? I spend a lot of time trying to do that and trying to pick my words correctly. But I think at some point, it's very important for me to make sure that I don't relent in terms of how I position myself. So if I feel like that day I will serve snacks, I will serve snacks because I feel like doing it on that day. But otherwise, it's not my duty. And if, for example, I'm making a point and that point is actually being ignored, I will keep quiet, listen to all the other points, and make my point once again. Because what it means is that maybe they haven't heard it properly. So it means that I need to summarize everything else that everyone else has said and say, despite all this, I still believe and put my point across and make sure that it has been heard. So I think as women, we need to make sure that we don't apologize for who we are. When we come to the table, we sit there. And I think we need to even forget the notion of when I'm sitting at this table, I'm male or female. We just need to say, I've come, I'm part of the leadership team, and I've come and we're going to make decisions. In terms of the second one, which is around advice around leadership and home, I don't believe I'm perfect at everything, but I believe that I've got some strategies that have worked for me. I thoroughly enjoy being a mother, and I thoroughly enjoy being a wife. And I also thoroughly enjoy being a leader within the institution. And I realize that without any of these particular roles, I'll actually not be the same person, and I'll actually be incomplete in terms of who I am. And therefore, I create time for each of my various roles. And that's how I balance it out. So my family knows that there will be times when I'm not available. And my family also knows that there will be times when I'm available. When I'm there with my family, I'm fully there with my family. I take off my leadership role, I take off my executive hat, I take off my doctor hat, and I actually just become a wife and enjoy it. And that's how I go about it. Is my husband more qualified than me? Very interesting question that you asked. Particularly because my husband is a colonel in the military, and so he is a macho male type of a person. When we started the PhD journey, we actually did our master's degrees at the same time. He encouraged us to do our PhDs together. And I finished my PhD first. He's still doing his PhD. So whether I'm more qualified than him or not, I really can't say that at this moment in time, because we could have finished together, but he had to be deployed into combat for about a year. And so he was left behind during that time when he was in combat because of the nature of his work. So that's where I am. I can never overstress the fact that I'm a doctor before him, because he is an alpha male. Both the institutional barriers and the cultural barriers will continue to be a struggle for women in leadership. And the reason is because culturally, a woman is supposed to stay at home and look after the children. What are you doing busy trying to go out and work and spend longer hours? How come, the husband gets home first before you do it? How come you go on these extended trips and the husband has to stay home and look after children? But that's why I'm saying that we should begin to define that new narrative, because we realize that it's not just about me. It's about many other women as well who are going through those particular issues and who are facing those similar barriers. So as we start to reshape our culture, we'll come to a point where organizations such as the one I work for has just introduced paternity leave, and therefore men can go and live. And it all comes from knowledge, from knowing things, from being enlightened. And therefore, let's put the information out there and say other societies cope like this. There are so many couples that I've met from the diplomatic community whose husbands have come to follow the wife, and the husband is the house husband who spends time taking children to school, attending assembly, making sure that everything is organized. And they are fine and comfortable with it. We need to come to a point where the husband is comfortable with doing something like that. And it's not too far off. I believe it's going to be soon. If my husband can say, let's do a PhD together, then it means we are getting somewhere, because I'm sure many other women in this room have been encouraged to get more education and to thrive in their careers by the very men that they have, who were brought up in the same culture that we have. So it's time. Thank you.